Edward Boyd joins us live now. Ed, the June quarter inflation numbers will be released. The annual rate of inflation could jump to 6.3%. What happens then?
Well, what happens then is the Reserve Bank is probably pretty likely. Well, we know they're raising interest rates next week, but the question is how much? Is it going to be 50 basis points? Or there's now some speculation from some economists that the RBA could be lifting rates by 75 basis points at its upcoming meeting. So that's the big implication for the economy, where the cash rate goes from here. So inflation at 6.3%, that's headline inflation. So that would be the highest rate of inflation in 32 years. And then underlying inflation, which is the figure the RBA looks at, is expected to jump to about 4.7%, which is also a multi-decade high for underlying inflation. So the RBA is going to have to act. Remember, these are the figures for the June quarter. So they've lifted rates in May, June and July already. So they've had 2 cash rate rises during this inflationary period. And they'll see the impact of what they've of those rate rises on the economy. And I don't think the rises are going to have had much impact at all, Pete, on inflation. So they're going to have to make it back heavy for the rest of this year.
Yeah, and there's precedent for it, isn't it, Ed? The Canadians moved at huge leaps. The Americans too, possibly even looking at a full percentage point. So everyone's playing catch up.
Lots of banks around the world are playing catch up. Even the Reserve Bank of New Zealand has been lifting rates very aggressively. They're at 2.5% compared to us at 1.35%. Yeah. So lots of central bankers, this is what they're all doing right now, Pete.
So just to be clear, 75-point rise potentially in play.
Potentially in play. Yeah, look, that's a couple of economists are now saying that there's a chance of that happening. So remember, the Reserve Bank has lifted rates by larger points before. I think back in the early 2000s, they did 1% in a single cash rate decision. So it's not unprecedented, but it's quite unusual.
Yeah. OK, this afternoon, Rio Tinto to release its half-yearly profit results. Ed, analysts expecting falling commodity prices to hit Rio's profit too.
Iron ore prices are down. The prices of other commodities are down as well. So aluminium is another big one for Rio, along with copper. So all of these commodities have come back in value over the last sort of 6 or 7 months. Iron ore in particular is currently at about $110 a tonne. Last year at one point it was at $220 a tonne. So Rio's profits expected to be a bit lower, but they're still expected to make about $22 billion in revenue. And pay out a dividend of about $5 a share. So shareholders should still be pretty happy. This is the first big company to report this season. OK, so we've got some big figures out today, Ed. The Americans have got some big figures out tomorrow too. US Fed Reserve, the chairman, Jerome Powell, he'll host his press conference about this time tomorrow morning, perhaps a little bit earlier, but they're expected to lift rates 75 basis points. In America, we know inflation is at a 40-year high, 9.1% for them, and they've been consistently raising rates over the last couple of meetings. The last meeting that was they raised rates by 75 basis points, and tomorrow they're expected to lift by 75. So that's going to be the big one to watch tomorrow morning.